She had a booking that they needed her ASAP, and she had to do that. So we are very excited for her to be there, but the show must go on. So I am here, and today I want to talk about. It's funny with Gabby and booking though is, well, how are we dealing with rejection? Right? Not getting bookings. I think that's a good conversation for us to have. What do we do in the face of those challenges, right? Meaning, what do we do when we are doing a lot of auditions and we're not getting any work? What do we do when we're trying to put ourselves out there and nothing's happening? You know what I mean? What do we do with all of that, and how do we manage it and move forward? So we're going to chat about that today. And of course, this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you're new here or you're coming back and you haven't done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell notification, please, because you don't get, you get notified if you hit that bell. If you don't, it defaults to not notifying you. So make sure you do that. And also make sure you leave a comment in the chat. Tell us where you're from and questions. This is a good time to ask questions, and put your question in the chat, and I'd love to answer it for you. Okay? So, all right. So let's talk about how to deal with rejection. I think that it first and foremost, just to get it out of the way, this is a common thing for all of us, right? I mean, for all of us in this industry or any performance industry, we're going to get rejected. And I mean, I hate that word because it sounds like you've been rejected. It just sounds bad, but I do think that if we because that's such a negative kind of feeling to it, as opposed to you weren't chosen for this particular job. So I think, like I said, first and foremost, this is a part of what we do, right? A part of what we do is putting ourselves out there, trying to get in front of people who are hiring voice actors. And if they, at that moment, are looking for something that we're offering, then we could possibly get hired or get an opportunity to move forward. But here's the thing, and this is what I want to kind of really drive home today, is when you're putting yourself out there and you're getting in front of people, you might not always be the right fit. And it has nothing to do with your acting, it has nothing to do with your performance, it has nothing to do with all the work you put in. It could be that you are just not the right fit. So I have my first book or so that I wrote. Not very good, but it was it's called Code of Conduct, and it's supposed to be a series, but I've yet to finish the series. Anyways, the point is that I wrote this book and I put it out there, and I wanted to get a narrator because I was like, well, I could narrate my own book, but it would be really cool to like go through the process of hiring a narrator just to see what it's like on the other end, you know what I mean? And as an author, not a casting director, or casting like we do with Academy Voices, because I was just casting and stuff all morning. So, I I put out an audition and I got auditions and stuff. And interestingly enough, I had some incredible, talented voice actors audition, and I mean, majority of them were beyond fantastic. However, the character itself, and as I listened to it more and more, I realized what I was looking for in the character. I wrote it in third person, but kind of in that third person, first person split, you know what I mean? Where it's third person, but it's more of they're like it's almost like they're talking about themselves in the third person. You know what I mean? So so there was an attitude to the narration. And people had really good performances, but not everybody had that particular attitude with their read. That doesn't mean they didn't do a great job. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't have done a good job. It just means that in that particular moment or that feel, right, there was an attitude needed. And I think that for me was something that was an aha moment, just in general, you don't know what someone really is looking for, and a lot of times they don't exactly know. They're going to put out something that general instructions or whatever, but they're looking as well to have blanks filled in, and you bring what you bring, and sometimes fills the blanks for them, sometimes not completely. And that's not that doesn't mean that you aren't doing a good job and you aren't doing what you're supposed to do, or you're supposed to be doing. It just means that you weren't a right fit for that particular project. So I think what happens is we feel this rejection, like we're not good enough, we're not making it, we're never going to get a job, or we're not going to get hired, or this is a waste of time. All these feelings flood into us, into our minds, as we're not getting more, we're not getting hired a bunch. So I want to take a step back and look at a couple things. First off, I recommend that you start tracking. Take a sheet, whatever, Google Sheet or anything, a spreadsheet, and start tracking how many auditions you're doing a day, week, etc. Really. All right. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this is because I think it would be one, for my mentor students, right? And by the way, I've opened my mentorship program again for the second half. So, I've got some slots open. I'll put a link below if you're interested in that mentorship program. It's where I mentor you directly. But the I do this sometimes with my mentor students, is we track what our auditions. So what I mean by that is that we take a spreadsheet and we're going to write down, I did X amount of auditions today. We add that up at the end of the week. I did X amount of auditions. Why do we do that? Because first, we can only affect certain things. We can affect how many auditions we do a day, a week, a month, etc. And I find that a lot of times our emotions betray us. So meaning that, we will think we're doing a lot, and because in our minds we're constantly thinking about it. But what we're actually putting out into the world is not that much. So because of that, we need to really write down and track what we're doing so that we get an accurate look at how many auditions is actually going through the pipeline, and then what are the results based off of those auditions. A lot of times you'll be like, oh my gosh, I actually am not doing very many auditions. You know what I mean? So like if I'm doing one or two and I got one or two in this week, but I feel like in my mind I was just constantly thinking about it and I got to get in there and stuff, you might be mentally exhausted. But when you look at your spreadsheet and you track how many you actually did, you'll be like, well, actually, I didn't actually get very much. And that is a very powerful tool. So start tracking how many auditions that you're doing. Second thing, there's some other things to track as well. Remember, so depending on what platform we're talking about, I'll talk about platforms real quick. Like Upwork, how many proposals are you sending? Okay, how many gigs have you put up on all these different platforms? How many samples you've put up on Voquin? Do you have all 45 samples up? Start tracking, the activities you're taking as well. This is just, again, it's very helpful to go back and look and say, this is, I need to up my game. So here's a perfect example of how tracking can help you also on another way. So let's say that this week I've signed up, I've got ACX, I've got Academy Voices, I'm on voices.com or Voice123, one of these websites, and you're getting auditions. And you start auditioning. Okay, I'm just talking about platforms right now. And you're getting auditions and you say, okay, well, I'm going to try to do 50 auditions this week. And out of 50 auditions, right, I'm going to do 10 a day. And at 10 a day, my hypothesis, I kind of love this, like the scientific method. My hypothesis is if I do 50 auditions, I want to get 1 to 3 jobs. I'm just throwing that number out there. That's my hypothesis. So, in order for me to know whether or not 50 auditions get 1 to 3 jobs, I have to do 50 auditions. And I need to do them over a couple of weeks, right? Because sometimes as we're working, remember, it's a snowball effect. Because you might do 50 auditions and not get any work. And then the next week, those jobs or those auditions get hired. Do you know what I mean? Or the next week. Like if you've done this enough, you'll know that sometimes not everybody is, you send in an audition and it's not like everyone listens to it right at that moment and they hire someone right at that moment. That doesn't always happen. So it takes sometimes a couple of weeks to get casted. So, put your auditions in there and move on. This is why this is a very effective tool as well. Because one, you can affect the change, meaning that you can affect how many auditions you do. And two, we know that by doing auditions, that's how we get hired. Okay, what's one way how we get hired? But we know we do enough auditions, we're going to get a job. So we can affect that change and we can, determine that, or we can predetermine the outcome. Now, our job then is to look at that logically and say, okay, I did 50 auditions and I got one job. Great. So logically, you say, okay, if I want two jobs, I need to start doing double that, 100 auditions. If I want three jobs, maybe like in a week, I need to do 150 auditions. So now I'm thinking, okay, I got to do 30 auditions a day. Okay, and you might be like, well, that's too much. That's too crazy. People are doing this. I'm not like making up a number. I mean, I'm making up the numbers, but those audition numbers, 30 auditions a day, that's not irregular for a full-time working voice actor, especially on the platforms, to be really doing that many auditions. Because you have to get yourself out in front of many people, kind of like I talked about in the beginning of this, because we don't know what if they're going to pick you at that moment. So we've got to do a lot of auditions. So, that's a way for you to start saying, okay, I've done this many auditions. Let's say I did 50 a week, and for a month I did 200. And now that's 200, I got 4 jobs. Well, great. So now we know, right, that for basically every 50 auditions we do, we're going to get a job. Now that changes too, right? Because that's just a number. Like I know on ACX, every 10 to 12, 10 to 15 auditions I do are going to get a job. And I know that, on voices, it's more about like 50 to 100, I'm going to get a job. So they vary and that can change too. And remember, we can't discount the idea of the fact that we will eventually have repeat customers. So, this is the challenge that we are constantly up against is consistency. Can we consistently do right action to get work? I love the acronym of luck. Right? So someone has a lot of luck. Luck I like is laboring under correct knowledge. Think about that. You know what I mean? It said, labor or luck is laboring under correct knowledge. Like I get lucky a lot. Well, you're laboring under correct knowledge. So use that, post that somewhere, put it on a bumper sticker. I think you'll like that. But the point there is that it's not that you're getting lucky, it's you're doing the things that you need to do day in and day out, and magically things just start to happen. I do think it's funny because it can be misleading because things aren't always, it's not like there's a bell that rings, and I think that's why certain platforms got smart, like Fiverr or different places where they have like notifications or bells when you get a job or something, and it rings almost like a casino, right? Where a bell goes off, because when we're doing a lot of action, we're taking a lot of action, something might come and it seems like it comes out of the blue, but that out of the blue job or out of blue opportunity only comes when you're taking a lot of action, but it doesn't always seem to become streamlined. And I think this is why a lot of people struggle making the correlation all the time between how much work they're doing or what's happening and how they're getting work or they're getting jobs. But there is a correlation. You can't separate them because you're putting stuff out in the world. Now, that's me getting, see, Gabby's not here to ground me. I'm getting more philosophical, right? Because I think of the things, right, in the universe, and that we're putting ourselves out there and we are, it's like the laws of the universe. Do you know what I mean? You reap what you sow, and you have to sow first in order to reap. And you have to put it out in the world, and you got to put it out, and you got to put it out, and you got to create, and you got to create, and you got to do, and then, right, it will come back to you. And the more you put out, the more it will come back to you. I mean, it's funny. It is simple, and we all know this. I do think the challenge comes with the consistency because we're also living a life, and a lot of stuff comes up. But we've got to keep that into our mindset. We reap what we sow. But first, we have to sow. So we've got to audition. We've got to get ourselves out there. We've got to continuously create. Okay, we've got to create. We got to create. We can create in the form of auditions, create in the form of putting up gigs, create in the form of sending out emails, create in the form of social media. Create, 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 create. Then we will receive. But you have to overly sow. Okay, and I think this tracking that I was talking about will also help you and make sure it's keeping you on track, because you can look at it and say, okay, this week I'm going to do, let's say I'm just going to do 5 auditions a day. I'm going to do 5 auditions a day. And I want to keep those auditions, like we talked about yesterday, to 10 minutes. So that means I know that I should be able to get these 5 auditions in under an hour. Well, I mean, we all should be able to do that. And I can guarantee you that probably 95% of voice actors are not doing 5 auditions a day. I've worked with a lot of voice actors, and I can tell you a lot of them are not doing, I mean, and I that's a big number, 95%. They're not. They're not doing it. And there will be all kinds of reasons why. Well, I'm not on this platform. I'm not. Where do I get the auditions? Where do I do this? Where do I do that? What, this is not happening, and I get it. I mean, they're not invalid reasons. They're valid reasons, but we have to eliminate those reasons. Like, if we have to get on the platform that's getting auditions. I mean, some platforms are free, like ACX, and I understand it's not great, paying work, but there's audiobooks there that do pay per finished hour. Get on there and audition and they go up every single day, right? We can join, Voice123, voices.com, save up some money, get on there, get those things. We can join Academy Voices. We're starting to get more per finished hour books up there. You got to get yourself up on these places that are bringing in auditions. And also, what you can track is, how many gigs am I putting up? How many new samples am I putting up a day? How much am I sharing? How many emails am I sending out a day? Am I sending out 25 emails a day? I guarantee you 97% of voice actors aren't doing that, probably more than that. Okay? So, these we know they're not revolutionary ideas, but what's interesting is how many of us don't do them. We want to do them, we think about doing them, but we don't. All right, guys. I know, I can talk forever if you don't stop me and ask me a question or interject. So make sure put some questions into the chat. We had Jeremy. Good to see you, my friend. Dylan says, I would be terrified to narrate one of your books. That would be like teaching mathematics to Einstein. No, it won't be that. No, no. I was fortunate enough to land a 7-book series. Nice, from handing out cards at a Comic-Con. That's awesome. I don't know if I should still audition with 7 books already lined up. I don't want to get out of practice. Um, yeah, Dylan, that's a good question. So, I mean, the follow-up question I would say was, have you started on these? Like, do you have a contract? Like, you actually working on them? Because if you're actually working on them, you probably want to, focus on the 7-book series. Like, if you have all 7 books there and they're waiting on you, that's probably going to be a full-time thing for quite a while, depending on how long the books are, right? So I would not sweat necessarily about you doing certain things. But here's the rub with that as well. That's great, but we know that the 7-book series will eventually come to an end. There's only 7 books, which means that we still have to have a business going on outside of the 7 books. So, that is a good kind of rule of thumb, to make sure you have something up somewhere where you're still marketing yourself, you're still doing things, and it's not a bad idea to set an hour aside every day to audition. Now, I would say that if it's shorter work, you're currently on book 3, okay. If it's shorter work, like commercial work, things like that, you should be able to knock those out. Longer book work, you might want to wait until you're further along in the series, like maybe the end, 6 or 7, or 5 or 6 or 7, and let people know, hey, I can start in about 2 months, because I got it's okay to have, because right now you have, you're on 3, so 4, 5, 6, 7, but it's okay to have multiple books in the queue waiting. People are kind of funny. I mean, like, authors and writers, they like working with people who are in demand, right? Because it makes us feel like you're hot stuff, right? And people want to work with you. So yeah, so that's what I would say, Dylan. Let's see, with only 30 to 60 minutes per day I can spend on VO, I'm at the point rig HR. Sorry, I don't know HR now, where I debate further setup of profiles and practice or going for auditions. Okay, good question, Alex. Well, I mean, it's a question, but I can kind of give you thought. So there's going to be passive and like passive marketing, and then non-passive marketing, right? Aggressive marketing. So what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing here is we want to make sure that the passive marketing things like putting your gigs up places, having getting up on websites where they are marketing you is a good thing to do. Okay, you want to get those done so that because they market you without you having to audition. So I would recommend, if you don't have those done, focus on those, get those done. When you get things up places that are marketing you without you auditioning, like on Fiverr, your gigs on Upwork, Voquent, these places that will uh, again, that will market you without you auditioning. Get those up, because you can, you know what I mean? You're getting marketing without you doing anything. And then get to the auditioning. I hope that makes sense. Steve, you're my hero as well. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Gabby should be back tomorrow. So that'll be good. And we will see you all then. Thank you. Don't forget, check out Avio's Journey and our academy. We've got some incredible things. We got a tech class coming up, which I'm really excited about that. We're adding a tech class. And again, my mentorship program is open, so I'll put that link below. Talk to you guys later. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Goodbye.